What's up, everybody? Tom Fazio here. Welcome to the channel. If you're new, welcome back if you're not. Today I'm going to be doing a Law of the Die summary from Law of the Die. Not the whole book, just one of several laws that are interspersed throughout the book. The book is, as I mentioned in other videos, it's fictional narrative. In a way, two stories in one that are tied together through a bit of good luck, perhaps. And along the way, we have these laws that I think stand alone outside of the book. And so, for me, they're things that have kind of popped up through my experiences rolling dice with an old friend in Shanghai, almost as a religious pursuit. We'd roll the dice for life options. I write about that in my first book, In Pursuit of Weightlessness, and I talk about it in a few other videos. But a lot of insights came from that practice that congealed with my experiences with martial arts, my study of philosophy, etc., into a few handy, I think, takeaways or precepts that we can use. So these are trying to bottle that, in a sense. So I'm going to read one for you here. This one comes in the chapter A Familiar Light of Reason, and the Law of the Die. Volatility plays in shades of gray. The master is patient to judge the rightness or wrongness of things, for time has a way of turning fools into sages and darkness into light. In the meantime, one must fortify the mind-body from temporary misgivings, for from strength is born resilience, from sensitivity, opportunity. The forceful imposition of will betrays a mind deprived of options. So this one is pretty jam-packed with information here. And I'm just going to start at the beginning. But volatility plays in shades of gray. So, simple sentence. What does it mean? Good example from martial arts, right? And Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. This is an idea that when we're facing volatility or complexity, it's never nothing, and it's never 100%, almost never, right? It's rarely that hurricane that just destroys everything in your life, and if we're even talking about it in the first place as volatility, then it's probably not nothing, right? There are shades and degrees, and that makes it incredibly challenging. So when people talk about resilience, when they talk about, navigating uncertainty, yeah, it's all well and good, but the challenge is it's uncertainty. We can't bottle it. We can't quantify the degree of volatility that we're talking about because it's wholly unpredictable. So while we can talk about our reactions and our responses to it, which the remainder of this law tries to get at, it's important to remember that we're not dealing with black and white situations here, that plans and roadmaps often fail if there's no room for adaptation, if we think we're going to be successful every step of the way. Oftentimes, these are delusional assumptions that wind up kicking us in the ass at some point, right? So, as I mentioned in some of the other laws, it's a lot more important that we have adaptability and resilience than it is that we've got a plan that presumably cannot fail. So the next sentence, the master is patient to judge the rightness or wrongness of things, for time has a way of turning fools into sages and darkness into light. This is one of those that I think is heavily reliant on context, and it's easy for us to have judgments, moralistic or otherwise, that are just too narrow in perception, right? We just don't have enough information to be able to know if this is a good or a bad thing, right? So one of the old, classical challenges, I remember this from back in the day from Philosophy 101, there was this question, is lying right or wrong? What if it's not a white lie? What if it's a significant lie? You are 100% certain you're lying about something and you actively take it on. Well, most people in the class said, yeah, we shouldn't lie. It's probably not ideal. And the next question is, well, what if you were, an Austrian that might have been protecting a Jewish family hiding in your basement during World War II? To which everybody says, well, I don't know, maybe lying is okay. So we're starting to find a hierarchy, and this is what I mean by shades of gray. Context determines everything. There is another parable. I talk about this in my programs because it's really emblematic of a psychology that is able to adapt and flow with circumstances, right? Getting to a point where you're not holding on so tightly to your own narrative of good and bad. You're able to see and receive new things in life without judging them immediately as if things are permanent, right? Everything is impermanent. And I do mention that and talk about that parable a little bit in the Essence of Lightness, my second book. But it's essentially, a bridge version of it. It's called The Farmer's Son. And it's the story of this farmer who goes through a series of events, and every time an event happens, like at one point, his horse runs away, and everybody in the village comes and says, oh, how unfortunate you are, your prize horse ran away. To which I believe he says it's, here nor there, or it's not good or bad, it just is what it is. And so everybody's saying, okay, well, that's fine. And then the horse comes back with other wild horses, and they say, well, how lucky you are, your horse came back, and not only that, but he brought other horses with him. And he says, well, it's not good or bad, it is what it is. And then his son takes the prize horse out for a ride and winds up falling and breaking his legs and can't, work the farm with him. And they all say, oh, it's so unfortunate. Your son just lost the use of his legs, and now he can't help you in the farm. And he says, neither good nor bad, etc. So you get the idea. And then war breaks out, and then people come to recruit all the healthy individuals from the farm, and their son was not healthy, obviously, he couldn't walk. And so, again, everybody says, oh, it's, what a shame your son can't, serve the country or serve our village and go out to war. And he says, neither good nor bad. And of course, everybody that went out to war died. And he said, oh, you're so lucky. Son didn't die in war. So anyway, this is droning on, but you get the idea. We have very quick judgments, and we think that we know what's good or bad very quickly. And we think we know what might be in our or other people's best interest because, hey, these things are good, those things are bad, it's black and white. But again, volatility plays in shades of gray. We can't predict necessarily the good or bad, rightness or wrongness of things based on where we are today. Things are constantly changing. New information, as the Big Lebowski says, new information has come to light, man. And so this is a hard one because, I and everybody else, I think that we want to feel like we've got a modicum of control, good insight into the way that we ought to live and, the nature of things. And so it's particularly hard to remind ourselves that, well, no, we don't know much, and new information can make us feel foolish very quickly, right? So moving on. In the meantime, one must fortify the mind-body from temporary misgivings, for from strength is born resilience, from sensitivity, opportunity. And this one now gets to, okay, I can't predict the future. Volatility is a black box to a certain extent. And events that take place they're not really predictable. I'm not really going to know how good or bad they are without more information that I might never have, right? So it's now backtracking and saying, okay, well, the externalities, yeah, we've got no control over, we can't know them. What do we have control over? And if we take a step back, we can say, well, we can fortify the mind-body from temporary misgivings, meaning from strength is born resilience. How strong am I as a person? Not just how much weight can I lift, which is a good domain to improve resilience, right? That's one of the biggest values of strength and conditioning. But am I a resilient type of person? Can I survive this scenario without needing to know whether it's conclusively good or bad, without needing to have a big win every time? And if I have that, if I'm a resilient, strong person, well, I don't need to have all the information, right? I will survive to see what comes and what changes. Second part, from sensitivity comes opportunity. Now this one might be a little harder to understand, but the more sensitive I become, we practice meditation, standing meditation. And one of the biggest benefits of that is it not only enlivens the senses and connects us to the present, but if we allow ourselves to stay connected, not to allow ourselves to be constantly pulled forward, back, but stay where we are, well, then we're open to things that manifest or arise organically. And we could say, okay, this is a better direction for me, or this is interesting. There's a lot that we might miss or overlook just because we're constantly judging. One of the biggest values of practicing mindfulness or standing meditation is that it allows us to be sensitive and open to what's happening right in front of us. And that is potentially opportunistic. That's a great thing, right? And this one concludes, the forceful imposition of will betrays a mind deprived of options. Obviously, this has a context within the book that is speaking to some of the circumstances, but for most of us, we can get this idea that if I'm insisting on my way and on being right, and this is a reminder to myself too, this is a hard point of practice for me. I pride myself on being relatively knowledgeable and competent in my domain, right? But the harder you hold on to what you know and the more you impose your will, well, it just means that you might not be open to other options and opportunities. And in some cases, that can be a real asset, right? It doesn't help us to be open-minded about the value of Twinkies if we're trying to lose weight and get fit. I mean, there's an obvious limitation to this idea, right? But there's a lot of stuff, and where this is better applied is in those things where we, debatably know what we know, or there's a lot of uncertainty, or in this case, volatility, where we're in a domain, business, love, relationships, you name it. There's a lot of stuff where we don't know the ins and outs, and where we are probably better off not holding too tightly to a worldview, a personal bias, an assumption. And this is what some would call deep work, right? This requires a lot of introspection and deconstruction of who we think we are, how we interact with others, how we carry certain types of assumptions and worldviews forward that might impact our interpretations of the current experience. So this is no easy thing, right? It requires a lot of soul searching and ideally meditation to be able to help deconstruct and non-attach from the we that we think we are, from the I that I think I am. And as odd as it might seem, but we really do hold most tightly to those things that threaten us, right? If I have to fight, it's because I feel threatened. I'm afraid of losing something. So if I'm insisting on my way in a conversation, argument, course of action, maybe this comes up even more, right? Determining a certain course of action, business, personal life, doesn't matter. It's really the case that I don't see any other course. And so it's a mind deprived of options. The more options that I have, if there could be 10 potentially good directions to take, well, I don't need to hold so tightly to one that I am resistant, unyielding. I won't listen. I won't even adapt to the new information as it comes to light. And so it's this idea of, well, if I'm strong enough to survive, I don't need to fight so hard. I can be patient, I can be still, I can wait, and if I'm sensitive, I can see and perceive opportunity. That's a pretty exciting thing, I think. So while this particular one is not as much about how and why we might roll the dice or explore life options, this is one layer higher, and it's talking about the mind, body, and the psychology of being able to consistently put ourselves in situations where we're exploring new things and taking risks. Right? Because this is not just an equation of how I step out and just say, yeah, I'm going to try something new today. This is really an equation of, if I practice this almost religiously, how do I make sure that my mind doesn't start to unravel, or that my body doesn't experience the fallout of trialing stupid things that might put me at risk? Because it's not easy to play in the void of uncertainty. And that's what the Dai are calling us to do. Any thoughts on this? Hopefully it's added a bit of insight or food for thought today. Drop comments in the comments section. We'd love to hear them. Try to get to them, of course. And if you're interested in the book at large, you can find the link in the description. And until next time, guys, be weightless.